We're talking about punch one versus punch three. Is punch one like your rock and throw, quick game stuff? Like, what's the terminology that you use there?
Yeah, so rocket throw, one step, punch one. There's a lot of different terms, but yeah, basically it's quick game play. So I'm always, saying to the guys like it's all about the timing of our drop is for the receiver's depth. So you as the play caller dictate that. So for instance, I talked about how fast Dan Marino's release was. If Dan Marino had a quick game hitch to the boundary versus a long release quarterback, say Micheal Faulds, you might even tell that receiver that he's running it at 6 yard hitch with Dan Marino. He's running an 8 yard hitch with Micheal Faulds, right? So the drop is about being in a good position to have weight transfer, but it does you no good if you're not pairing it to the athletes you have running the routes. So another good example of all of you have different speeds of receivers, right? If, at our level, for instance, we had a great guy, Curly Gittens Jr., who amazing speed. If we got him to run ins and outs at the same depth of some of our guys who aren't quite as fast, the timing's going to be really off, right? So we can't change the quarterback's drop all the time just because of the speed. So sometimes we'll change the depth of the receivers. Same thing goes, you might have a depth for a receiver to run a route, but all of a sudden that receiver's thinking, I got a 12-yard out. Coach said I got a 12-yard out. Well, 12-yard out is good if he's not in a hand fight with a DB and it's zone coverage. What if that DB's in press coverage and he's being locked up? Are you still telling that guy to go to 12? And what are you telling the quarterback about his drop? So the drop is important, but make sure you're marrying the drop with the receiver's routes and what they're being told. And as much as I love having quarterback meetings and receivers love having receiver meetings, getting them in the same room and letting them both hear these conversations is huge. Derek Knight, I see a question from you. How you doing?
I'm sweaty. How are you?
Good.
Finished your team's program. On that note with receivers, one thing that I've seen over the years is the fact that reading coverage and sitting routes, next level at CIS and then beyond, do you think that's as valuable or more valuable than developing the athlete themselves?
I'm not going to put, a grade on what's more important, but I would say, and this is hard for me to say because we've had some phenomenal athletes, I would take the receiver who isn't quite as good athletically, but understands the defense, understands when to inside release, outside release, sit in a zone, bend a route, versus the guy who runs, jumps, looks amazing, but covers himself by running into coverage a lot. So I would say, and Hamilton with June Jones, and I know Andy could speak to that. A lot of routes have multiple variations that are dictated by what the receivers see in front of them, right? So is it a coverage where I have a high defender on top of me? Is it a coverage where there is no high defender? So again, the quarterback and the receiver being on the same page. The other thing I'd say, which is, and we see it with the most successful teams in the NFL now, having a wide range of receiver capabilities is huge. So as much as it would be cool to have 5 Tyreek Hills out there, Tyreek Hill is really good because he has a Travis Kelce, he has a Sammy Watkins, right? And he has a Hartman, and they have some complements. The Bills have Diggs, but they also have Beasley, so having, putting your players in positions where they're running routes that can really help their skill set. So if you have a really smart guy who's an option route guy, put him in a position where he's going to make those decisions. If you have a burner, well, put him in a position where he's running, you know, goes, post, corners. So long-winded way of saying you'd love to have both, but I take the guy who understands the D.
Just a follow-up. At next level, other than a variation of man, cut, and hold, is there any other combination of coverage that you see other than those, like in terms of like just a halfback and corner? Any other combinations that you get other than cut, hold, and a variation of man?
Yeah, so like the hybrid are like match principle coverages. You can even see combo coverages. So there's a lot of variations. So, and that's dictated sometimes by the opposing team, right? So there could be a match coverage for every defender on defense, but they might have one guy locked up in man, right? And, you know, so there are a lot of variations, but I would say a lot of teams are actually trying to get away from the traditional cover threes. The biggest thing, and I already talked about the Canadian field, we've got 65 yards wide. With quarterback's arms, you can put three guys back there and they just physically can't cover 65 yards, right? You really need in the Canadian game the ability to get four guys back there. So you might initially show, you know, cut coverage, but usually at, you know, the U Sport and the CFL level, those guys are told we're cut, but we're carrying stuff vertical, right? So there isn't anymore usually the traditional, this guy's low, he's always staying low. You're seeing more variations of, you know, cover fours and things like that. And I'd also add to that is you never see like three massive linebackers anymore, right? That dime position, that Sam linebacker is really a DB body now. So teams are getting that extra cover guy out there who's a bit of a hybrid.